With the sun having set, just across the border the Pakistani armour was facing difficulties. The commander of 51 Brigade, also the commander of this operation, was dealing with his own ghosts. Demoralized by the lack of air support and unsure of an outright military victory, he opted against advancing on Ramgarh. Instead of bypassing Longewala, he decided to position himself there. 51 Brigade set course across the border at 11 p.m., crossing into Indian territory at border post 635. Soldiers from the Longewala post on patrol in the area spotted the movement.
I had an area of responsibility between boundary pillars 632 and 638. But this patrol was sent in the afternoon of the 4th December under an officer who was tasked to go to area of boundary pillar 635. Now, as luck would have it, nobody has expected this, that there is going to be some development. But at about a few minutes before midnight, the officer who was on patrol reported to me that he can hear some tank noise across the border, but it appeared to him that they were quite far away. The moment he passed this information to me, that there is a tank noise across the border, I passed it to my CO, who was away, but the 2IC was very much in the battalion headquarters. He asked me to check back with the officer who was on patrol, Captain Dharamveer that time. He confirmed to me that certainly it is a tank noise and it looks that they are heading towards the boundary pillar, towards the Indian side. When he confirmed to me, I passed this information immediately to my brigade headquarters. Well, the first reaction was that people at the top was reluctant to accept this move of the Pakistanis. They thought that they are not in a position to take such a venture in this area or this type of terrain. And maybe that I am not giving them or feeding them the correct information. People at some stages felt that I am becoming jittery and perhaps panicking and all. Since the war has started, but very often it does happen sometimes. But later on, after about another 10-15 minutes, when the patrol leader again gave me a call on the wireless set, that sir, the tanks are coming now close to the border and I can see the dust. I again passed to the brigade headquarters. Look, there is some development taking place. My officer is repeatedly telling me that there is a tank noise and it appears to him that they are heading towards us. Few minutes later, the patrol leader confirmed to me that now he can see the tanks dust coming towards border. And that night, 4th, 5th December, being a full moonlit night, and you know the area is quite peaceful, there are no noises and all. Particularly at night, the sand, you can hear the tank noise, a number of miles you can see, quite some distance you can hear the noise. Even at about few minutes past midnight, we also heard that there is something developing. There is certainly some noise. Again, this information was passed now to the not only the brigade headquarters but also to the div headquarters. When this information was being passed, the general officer commanding of the division, Major General R.F. Kombata, he came on the line and he wanted to speak to me as to what is happening. My brigade commander, Brigadier Kharbanda, he was on the line. The 2IC of the battalion, who was officiating in the absence of the CO in the battalion, he was also on the line. We were all on the multiple. I confirmed to him that it is 100% true that there is some development, there is a tank noise, and it appears that the tanks are coming toward the boundary pillars. Well, by that time, I think the Indian Forces commander realized that there is maybe some truth in it.
Across the border, Pakistan's 38th Cavalry, along with the artillery battery, were waiting for the support of the infantry. They would have to wait a long time as the infantry was having problems of its own. Travelling in requisitioned civilian vehicles, the convoy got stuck in the desert sands and broke down. and the men were forced to march to the rendezvous. On December 5th, at 2 a.m., tired of waiting and deciding to go ahead with the available troops, 38th Cavalry began the next wave of the thrust. At about the same time, Pakistan's 22nd Cavalry, organized into 4 squadrons, each carrying a company of infantrymen, had reached the Longewala-Jaisalmer road, bypassing the post and positioning themselves in the rear of its defenses. So far, things were going according to plan and looked in favor of the Pakistani forces. Just as the 38th Cavalry started their movement, the artillery accompanying them fired a salvo, which landed in and around the Longewala outpost.
When I was through to the general officers on the telephone at night, you can say at about 1 o'clock, midnight, on night 4th, 5th December, the enemy artillery across the border, the medium guns started shelling our posts. When this telephone was on and I was talking to the GOC, they heard also the noise of the shell being fired, the shots being fired, a lot of noise he heard on the tape. He said, "What is this, Kuldeep?" I said, "Sir, this appears to me enemy fire on us, it is artillery fire."
This time, the call for help with sounds of explosions in the background was taken seriously, though little could be done about the situation. In the absence of the brigade commander, the commander of the 22nd Cavalry, hearing what sounded like a pitched battle at Longewala, decided to clear the post before advancing on Ramgarh. Leaving 2 of the 4 squadrons of tanks and troops on the road, he moved out with the 2 remaining squadrons to accomplish his self-imposed mission. As the 1st squadron of tanks approached the post, they drew resistance and deployed themselves on the Longewala-Ramgarh road. The 2nd squadron deployed themselves on the road to Tanot, surrounding the post. This move was to be the start of the collapse of a so far successful Pakistani mission. On taking renewed consideration of the messages from the outpost and the reported bearing of the tank column, there was no doubt of their target. A radio call was made by Major General Khambata to the base commander Jaisalmer, Wing Commander Bawa, informing him of the situation on the ground.
Just past middle of the night, about 2:30, now I get a radio relay message from the 12th Infantry Division General Khambata, and he told me, "Look, the enemy is running to capture the Jaisalmer airfield, and he's coming in with tanks. So if you want to stay, you stay. You want to get away from there, you get away." I told him that you are supposed to stop these tanks from getting to the airfield. The air defense is your problem. He says, "I'm too far away, I cannot do anything for you. Since I cannot do anything for you, you have to fend for yourself." I was supposed to be defended by missiles, but he says, "I don't know where they are." Though the missiles were in the area, but not deployed. I know I'm making an assertion on this because the missile batteries were being housed on the airfield in the air-conditioned room. But people had gone out to carry out reconnaissance, but not deployed.
Soon after, another communication was received by the Air OP commander based at Ranau.
At about 4:30, General Khambata was on the line. Now this is what exactly he told me. He says, "Atma, enemy tanks are now heading for Longewala post. And first we were not believing these reports, but now it is confirmed that they are enemy tanks. And we have no FAC there, no artillery there, and no anti-tank guns." Sangha was my best pilot, he was a flying instructor. And Sangha, I said, "I think it is Sangha who should go first, because I had only slept for 2 or 3 hours that night." And I briefed him about the whole situation. And Sangha took over at first light.
He came and told me that the plans have changed. Pakistanis have launched a surprise attack at Longewala, and that Longewala was at that point of time under attack. And he also informed me that our own air support would be coming in from Jaisalmer.
When this was apprised to me by the general that the tanks were running in, I called the flight commander and I also called the ground defense commander. I apprised them of the situation that we are going to be overrun by the tanks if they succeed in coming in here. if the enemy has crossed into our territory or across the international border, he must have crossed at sundown or little after sundown. And by the time the thing filtered and came up to me at 2:30 or so, the tanks, if they had hit the Blacktop Road, they would be at Jaisalmer within about 4 to 5 hours. Because once they are on the Blacktop, the trucks and the tanks can maintain a high speed and reach. So calculating that way, I was expecting the tanks to get to Jaisalmer just about the time when the day was breaking.
Months of preparation were now to be put to the test.
There was no panic as such, but we decided to change the armament load of the aircraft to tank penetrating rockets, armor penetrating rockets, and that took some time. The ground crew worked very hard in the darkness and got the aircraft ready by dawn.
At first light on the morning of 5th December, 2 Hunter aircraft were launched from Jaisalmer.
The first 2 aircraft flown by Coordinator D.K. Das and Flight Lieutenant Gosain with the instructions to examine if there are any tanks around Jaisalmer airfield itself.
It was still dark. So getting out onto the taxiway also itself was a problem because there was no light in the Hunters. Well, you can call it as luck or whatever the case may be. We could just about make out the center line of the taxi tracks or something like that. So we started following that. We went up to the runway, and when we asked for the permission, etc., all that the ATC said was, "You are clear to taxi out, clear to line up, clear to take off." All in one go. So, okay. So there we go. We lined up. I told Ramesh Gosain, I said, after 10 seconds you get airborne. My nav lights are on. So follow those. My takeoff was from the broken lines of the center line. From one broken line to another broken line because I couldn't see anything further than that. So we got airborne and my number 2 Gosain caught up with me. We did a complete turn towards the north. I could just about barely make out the silhouette of the Jaisalmer fort. So I went up to the Jaisalmer fort, hugging the ground. If you avoid the fort as such, right, we could comfortably fly at about 50 to 70 feet. From there onwards, since I knew the topography and the area well, I caught on to the road which was leading from Jaisalmer to Ramgarh. That was the tar road. My idea was to just keep seeing that road because that is the only navigation aid which I have got to go to Ramgarh. Because if I stray away from that particular road and go on my compass, any deviation of even 1 degree to 2 degrees will land me up somewhere else and I will never be able to spot Ramgarh. So we went to Ramgarh and I did not see any tanks. So I said, okay, we will turn towards the west. So we started following the road leading from Ramgarh to Longewala. As we closed in towards Longewala, I could spot something black like matchboxes lying on the ground. That was the first hint of tanks. So I said, Ramesh, can you see what I see? He said, yes, sir. It's okay. Now, by the time we went close by, the light had come up and I could see, bits of cotton puffs in the air. Then sudden realization took place. I said, listen, these are ack firing taking place at us. So I told Ramesh, I said, step up. So straight away we stepped up. We did one orbit. That was the time I realized, I said, I've been told there are a few tanks there, but I could see enough matchboxes around. And then I started counting by pressing the RT button. I said 1, 2, 3 and things like that. I counted up to about 30 odd, 33 or something like that.
Just after sunrise on the 5th of December, I took off and I headed for Longewala with whatever limited resources I had. I had no contact frequency with the ground troops, no army maps, only the flying map.
As the aircraft made visual contact with Longewala, the Pakistani forces were found preparing to mount an attack on the post. One tank was climbing the steep face of the dune, while another was moving towards the helipad.
And that time I told them the tank closest to the post be dealt with first.
So I took on to the lead tank which was coming or going towards the north. It was a north-south attack. So I set up my attack pattern and I went into the attack. Here it will be worthwhile to mention that I am going into attack as a single aircraft with rockets, whereas I am being fired upon by the whole lot of tanks which are on the ground with their AK. Again, I am coming in almost a steady down, no maneuvering till I finish my attack. Even if I had to maneuver, that is only to keep the sight on the target. Whereas the others are in a position to maneuver and fire at me. My firing range is 900 yards. And 900 yards is also the lethal range for the anti-aircraft guns on the ground. While in the attack itself, I had to use my camera to first uncage my sights and keep that sight onto the target. Since it is a moving target, I am also maneuvering, allowing for that particular movement, giving the wind allowance as well as for the moving target allowances. While in this particular attack, I require a tracking time of 3.5 to 4 seconds. I am coming down from approximately 3,500 feet down to the required height with approximate angle of dive of about 30 degrees. I could see the ACAC firing, and every fifth round is a tracer, and the tracer leaves a mark when it is coming towards me. So I am through the cone of fire, number one. Number two, there were two other tanks which were maneuvering to come in front of the tank on which I was doing the sighting. Okay, they were kicking up the sand, so they were sort of putting up a sand screen so that the target can be sort of masked. But through that sand screen, I had to keep my sights onto the target. This is what I did, and what I estimated as the correct range, I fired 4 rockets. The moment I released them, I knew that I will get a target. As I pulled out, my number 2 Gosain called out, "Sir, congratulations, direct hit." I was thrilled to the core.
The pilots were excited at hitting the targets accurately. All movement on the ground came to a halt. But with both India and Pakistan using similar tanks, in this case the T-59, there remained a nagging question.
I pulled up from there back to 3,500 feet plus, contacted my number 2. So I told him, "Ramesh, go down and see whose target are these. I mean, are they our tanks or whose tanks are these?" So he went in. He went for a low pass over the targets. He made the pass, pulled out, and guess what he said? He said, "Sir, they are Indian tanks." At that juncture, my morale was in my boots. I was sweating from my helmet down to my boots, and my G-suit was fully wet. I said, the war started. The very first attack, a direct hit by an Indian Air Force aircraft onto the Indian Army tank. I just couldn't visualize what was going to happen to me after that. He says, "God, what have I done?"
The nervous pilots decided to orbit the area till they received confirmation.
Now, I heard faintly on my earphones somebody calling out, "Mission over Longewala, what is your call sign?" So after a few repetitions, I could now realize that somebody is trying to call me up. Then I realized it is Sangha.
I identified myself by name. Because we had been on the same base, we knew each other. I knew them and we made contact.
"Yes, Sangha, where are you?" "Sir, I am coming towards Longewala." I said, "Where are you? Tell me your position."
I was 5-6 miles short of Longewala. I could see dark plumes of smoke going up in the sky.
So we both flew towards north. We spotted him at low levels. We started escorting him back to the battle area.
They asked for my help for identification of the tanks down below. So apparently these people had come and attacked those 2 tanks and then got doubtful whether they have by mistake attacked their own tanks. But I had a look at those tanks, and from the shape of the tanks, I realized that they were not Indian tanks, they were Pakistani tanks.
He hesitated a bit, but he said, "Sir, they are not our tanks, they are Pakistani tanks. Go ahead, good shooting." That was the relief for me. I said, "Sangha, get out of that area." So he just got out, and then we went in for further attacks.
What followed was the worst tank massacre after the Battle of El Alamein in World War II. The very first sortie accounted for 5 tanks confirmed destroyed.
I finished another 2 tanks with my another 8 rockets. Then I had the guns with me. So I took on to the moving tanks with the guns.
Half an hour later, as the tanks prepared for another attack on the post, the next flight arrived and destroyed another 6 tanks.
In the sortie number 3 for today, one aircraft went US, while that of Flight Lieutenant Suresh was very serviceable, so he took off alone and was followed by me about 10 minutes later. When I arrived out there, he told me on the RT that he had done some attacks, but now his aircraft was damaged. And I asked him that if it is still flyable, to fly over to orbit overhead while I completed my attacks on the tanks. We did so and returned to base, and I found that his aircraft did not seem to have the power to move forward. There seemed to be some damage onto the tailplane side, but it couldn't be very easily seen as to what exactly it was. However, his undercarriage came down safely and checked out, and we all landed safely. When we landed, we noticed that the whole tail cone had become oval rather than round, and the underside of the aircraft showed that it had banged into something. And then the story came out. Cookie said that as he closed in on one of the tanks on his firing pass, the tank appeared to fire his main gun, and he got totally disoriented. And he brushed into a sand dune. It's amazing how the aircraft bounced off that sand dune and got into the air again with only this slight damage. But the damage on the aircraft was very, very definite, and it's just to Cookie's credit that he maintained his composure after such a close call to land the aircraft safely. I understand this was also seen visually by one of the AOP pilots.
I saw him going into an attack and hitting his tailplane onto the sand dune, because I think he got a flash. That's what I came from later on, that as he was going in, the people firing at him from down below, and the flash came into his eye and he lost that concentration. He hit his tailplane. I saw the aircraft bouncing up into the air, and it was remarkable. You know, he flew that aircraft back.
Lost the element of surprise and not receiving air support by the Pakistan Air Force, the Pakistani armor was thrown into absolute chaos. By noon, the tally stood in favor of the Indian Air Force, with 12 tanks destroyed. In the periods of relative calm, when the Indian Air Force was not overhead, the tanks surrounding the post were ordered to pull back to the south of the post around 51 Brigade. By now, the Indian Army's reinforcements had arrived and were in the process of deploying themselves.
When Sangha came, he told me, he is briefing, "Sir, enemy has now stopped all movements." Then he briefed me about the complete details, and in fact he drew a small sketch. He says, "This is the places where tanks are burning, the pillar of smoke coming up in the battlefield from these tanks. All these tanks are burning. But there are some more tanks still intact in that area, which I couldn't see." And he told me that next sortie is coming at 1 o'clock. I took off at about 12:35, went to Longewala and oriented myself to the complete battle situation. I saw all those tanks which pillars of smoke were coming out. On the enemy side, all movement was frozen. Now, in my anxiety to find more tanks, which Sangha had told me are intact, from Longewala post, which were foremost troops, I raised my heights and keeping that road on the right, that Kharotar and Longewala road, I flew exactly about 4 to 5 minutes onto the enemy side, which could mean about 7, 8, 10 kilometers into the enemy side, and started observing on the right. Suddenly I found smoke puff from 2 places. There were 7 tanks in that particular sand dunes and that bowl. They were nicely tucked in. So I came back and started flying over Longewala post, waiting for the hunters. And I looked around, on the skyline I could see 2 hunters running. I immediately said, please come forward in the same line, I am waiting for you. So in no time, they followed that road, went in front of me, and then I guided them onto these tanks.
In the next 2 hours, 7 more tanks were added to the tally. A message from the Pakistani tank commander desperately calling for air support was intercepted.
दुश्मन की हवाई फौज ने नाक में दम कर दिया है। एक हवाई जहाज जाता है और दूसरा आता है और 20-20 मिनट ऊपर नाचता है। 40% फौज और सामान हलाक और तबाह हो चुका है। आगे जाना तो क्या, पीछे मुड़ना मुश्किल हो गया है। जल्दी हवाई फौज मदद के लिए भेजो, वरना वापस मुड़ना नामुमकिन है।
Unfortunately, no such help was coming. By the evening, the total stood at 19 tanks destroyed.
At the end of the day of the 5th, we couldn't really claim an accurate number of tanks, but there was a number of them burning on the effort, and it appeared that they had very few left unless there were reinforcements over the night.
During daylight, the odds were in favor of the Indian Air Force. Anything moving on the ground was attacked with devastating results. With nightfall, the enemy had all the advantages. The regrouped tanks could either retreat or forge ahead with their initial game plan. If they decided on the latter course of action, Jaisalmer Air Base was at great risk. The night proved uneventful for the Indian Air Force. For the Pakistani Army, things were different. Having taken heavy casualties during the day, the commander of 51 Brigade and the rest of the Pakistani forces were on the verge of mutiny. Orders to press on into Indian territory and capture their objective were ignored, and the brigade commander was considering a retreat. Morning found the tanks still milling around in confusion. This was just what the Indian Air Force needed. They took the gift with both hands. Under the pressure of the constant and accurate attack by the Indian Air Force, the Pakistani forces gave in to their frustrations. By sundown, the Indian Air Force had added to their existing score. The total now stood at 24 tanks destroyed, along with assorted vehicles and troop carriers.
Strictly speaking, I think the battle of Longewala finished on the 6th itself. At the end of the day, the army asked us to do a recce onto the western part of the border, which we had not done before, and from which the tanks appeared to come, to see whether there was any reinforcement build-up in that area. We spent the whole evening patrolling the border and inside Pakistan, but there seemed to be no movements that we could spot. When we returned to Longewala before going back to base, we found that the tanks had already withdrawn from the post along the track on which they had arrived and had bedded down for the night. But it was too dark to attack them. We returned to base and landed. And from there on the 7th and 8th, it was a question of just chasing these tanks back towards Pakistan, which most of the operations taking place on the border at a place called Border Post 638.
Relief for the detachment came the next day when 12 more hunters arrived at Jaisalmer. On landing, the pilots were given a quick briefing while the aircraft were refueled and armed. Without wasting a moment, peace pilots were on their way to engage the retreating tanks.
Initially, I must say that the Pakistani tank commanders were very, very aggressive and brave. They opened fire whenever the aircraft came into an attack. They moved their tanks very aggressively on the ground. But for us, that movement was not far enough to disturb our sighting system. There are many pictures of their tracks on the sand out there, and that tells you how they were maneuvering, but it didn't really come in the way of our sighting. As the day progressed and as hours went by and they started losing more and more tanks, they became extremely, I think they lost their morale. After that, if you attacked a tank, they kept the hull down, they did not fire, they just stayed as targets. It was sad to see, in one way, the breakdown of morale that took place into that force.
Having confronted and dealt with the immediate threat, the pilots of the 122 Squadron were now at a loose end with no targets.
There was a lull now in Jaisalmer with no enemies to attack. It was one of those. We had many pilots, many aircraft, and very little and very little work to do. We still patrolled the railway line and road, attacked any army or military train that was passing on the route, refraining from attacking any passenger, civilian passenger. If there is a target that you've got to attack, which is a military type target, for example, there's a military type target, could even be a train carrying military stores on a railway line, and you need to attack it. Now the best way to stop that train is to attack the engine, and we know that there's an engine driver there and maybe more. You don't think of it. The engine is a target to be hit, and you aim to hit it. And then if you can destroy whatever military stores are on that train, you have done your job. Initially in the war, on that same railway line, there used to be some passenger trains running on the 4th. Why Pakistan permitted passenger trains to travel on that railway line on the 4th after war had started was a surprise to us, but we never attacked a civilian train. By the fact nobody was there to guide us or to tell us not to do it or to do it. But I think the Indian Air Force has got a sense of integrity, and the country's got a very high moral values, holds high moral values, and out of that came the decision never to attack a civilian target.
Why this tactical masterpiece was not supported by Pakistan's air power still remains a mystery. Speculations run rife as to the result of this battle had there been a coordinated effort between the two wings of Pakistan's armed forces.
Looking back at it, I can tell you that if they had sent 2 fighters, they would have taken on hunters and their tanks would have had a field day on the ground, because we had nothing to defend against that. Our guns, artillery, they were still moving from Kishangarh side, and they reached sometime on the 5th afternoon, where they deployed in support of the ground troops.
They were already in the rear areas of a division, strung out on one single road, who was having great difficulty in trying to reverse its self. If they had air cover and sufficient air cover, we could not attack them. We would be attacking their air, and their air would be attacking us. And therefore they would be free from any attack in the air.
If they had air support, I think it would have been a very different